Hey, thanks for stopping back in to listen to podcast number 2. Um, I mentioned in the last podcast that I wanted you all to get to know me a little bit better so you can understand a little bit better. First and foremost, had a little bit of a rough night last night. The Lamictal that they have me on for seizures is a pretty rough medicine. Um, I have noticed that the longer that I take it and the higher the dose is that they put me on, the easier it gets. So I'm hoping that it gets even easier. But it's been a rough ride so far. For this podcast, I figure I'd go all the way back to my roots and talk about my grandparents a little bit. So my dad, his mother and father, their names were Gordon and Wilda. I will start off with my grandmother, Wilda. Her name was Wilda Pearl. Her maiden name was Holly. She was an amazing person. She had a little bit of a temper, and she had a little bit of sometimes an opinionated manner, but not in a bad way. She really wanted the people that were close to her to be the best versions of themselves possible. My grandma, Wilda, really liked the finer things in life. She worked at several nice stores where they sold fancy dresses and jewelry and stuff like that. I think one of them was Gilmore's. Another one was Hudson's, which were shops downtown in Kalamazoo, Michigan. She passed away when I was about 17 or 18, so I got a lot of time with her, and I would frequently spend days over at my grandma's house helping her grind cranberries or make cookies or play Yahtzee. I would also help her out with a lot of yard chores and stuff like that, and maybe didn't really realize it at the time, but super appreciative of the time that I got to spend with her. And I love her dearly. I remember her fondly. She really liked TV, although TV wasn't really a big thing back when I was a kid and when she was around, but I remember spending time watching I Love Lucy and The Golden Girls and Matlock and shows like that. I don't remember her watching too many shows like Days of Our Lives or anything like that, but maybe she did when I wasn't around. She also liked to collect coins. She was working on several books of like penny books and quarter books and stuff like that up until the time that she had passed away. And then that leads me to my grandpa Gordon, Gordon Learn. But before I move on, I should say, with my grandma's side, she had some brothers that I looked up to quite a bit, and they were good people. Ed and Bob. Yeah, just good people. But anyways, so moving on to my grandfather Gordon, which is where I get my middle name from. His middle name was Wade, and my middle name is Wade. And my son's middle name is Wade as well. So kind of passing that down. But my grandfather Gordon passed away about 4 years before I was born. So I never really got a chance to meet him. because he was already gone. But I heard a lot of great stories about him, and not just from the family, but also from the people that lived around the neighborhood. Some of the stories that I remember um, is a lot of the neighborhood kids would, my first and foremost, my grandfather, he had his own concrete construction business, and he also farmed, which was pretty common back then for people to farm and to have a job. He worked really hard doing concrete, and he did a lot of good stuff. One of his more memorable projects was he poured all of the concrete at the Michigan International Speedway, or MIS as we know it, back home. Um, and he would always have, he planted corn and potatoes and just about everything, but he always had a watermelon patch that he planted right on the side of the hill at the property. And a lot of the neighborhood kids would go over there and sit on the side of the hill where he couldn't see him from the house and pick watermelons and eat them. And it wasn't until years later that, and some of those kids were my uncles, by the way. And it wasn't until years later that they discovered that my grandfather knew that they were doing that and planted them purposefully there for them to do that. So that just speaks volumes on what kind of man he was. My grandfather was also military. He was drafted in World War II. He was a chief petty officer in the Seabees, and his job was to literally follow the Marines onto the beaches and lay the runways for the planes, because the planes were already in the air and they didn't have enough gas to go back. So while they were fighting, trying to take control of the beaches and stuff, my grandfather was out there laying down runways and trying to get a spot for the planes to land. So very dangerous job. He spent 4.5 years in the Pacific. I even as a military person, I don't want to know, or I can't even imagine the kind of stuff that he saw over there. While he was over there, he took it upon himself to make a plethora of trench art. He would use shells that he'd found or airplane glass. He made several things like knife handles and stuff like that. He made a very nice jewelry box made out of clamshells and pearls that he had found. Sent that home to my grandmother. Beautiful work, by the way. Really spent a lot of time on that, and just a good guy. He at the end of the war, right before it was done, he ended up getting hit by a bomb. The enemy had taken control of one of their planes, and it was coming into land, and they didn't realize that it had been stolen, and they didn't have radio communications with it, so that was pretty common back then, because radios weren't the same as what they are now. And it got about 100 feet from the runway, and it picked back up and opened the bomb doors and started shelling bombs on the beach where everybody was. And my grandfather dove behind a big palm tree, which saved his life, but he took a lot of shrapnel into the left side of his body, which caused a lot of problems. And he spent some time in the hospital over there. And he got selected during the end of his stay at the hospital. He got selected to be security to take the mail back home, for security for the mail. I think, and this is just my opinion, but I think that they were doing that to give the guys in the hospitals that had been hurt a chance to go home for a week or two, because what they would do is they would escort the mail home, and then they would give them like a week or two to stay home, and then they would escort the mail back. So I think that was really their way of like letting letting soldiers that had been wounded, get a chance to go home for a minute. And while my grandfather was home, they contacted him and said that the war had ended and he didn't have to go back, which was good for him. Also good for my uncle, my dad's older brother. When my grandfather got drafted, my grandmother was pregnant, so she gave birth after he had already left. So he had a 4-year-old son that had never met him when he got home. Excuse me. So that was good to be back. And then they had in between I believe it was in between my dad and my uncle, they had a set of twins that didn't make it, unfortunately, which I have often wondered if it were now, in our time right now, if maybe those twins would have survived. But twins was rough back in the day, and they didn't have a whole lot of modern medicine stuff for, child labor was still dangerous back then. I mean, we're talking, this was in the 40s. So, child labor was difficult. A lot of people died. A lot of babies, unfortunately, didn't make it. And then shortly after that, they had my dad. I think there's a 7-year gap between my uncle and my dad, maybe 8 years, somewhere around there. But there was quite a big difference. And my dad talked very fondly about his dad. So it's one of those things where I really didn't know him, but I knew him because other people talked about him a lot. We'll move on to my grandpa. He liked to build things. He liked to farm. He liked to make all kinds of stuff, and he really liked to fish. I got a lot of my dad said that they used to go fishing a lot, especially in the off seasons. So there's not a whole lot of concrete work to be done or farming to be done in the winter, so they spent a lot of time out on the ice fishing and doing all the things. Yeah. My grandfather ended up passing away from cancer in 76. So I have a feeling a lot of that had to do with some of his military stuff, but you never know at this point. Move on to my mom's mom and dad. That was my mom's mom was her name was Yvonne. Her maiden name was Good, and her family lived in Bay City, I think is where she's from. And my grandmother, I have very fond memories of her. We would play dominoes and board games and just stuff like that. And she really loved to cook. My grandmother really knew how her special talent was knowing how to make an amazing meal out of nothing. Like, she would just look at whatever she had and like throw together some stuff. So that was pretty cool. She was always cooking some good stuff up, and then there was always like windmill cookies and stuff at my mom's parents' house, my grandparents on that side. So but I have very fond memories of her, like I do my dad's grandparents. And then she passed away when I think I was about 16, maybe 15 or 16. She had passed away. And my grandfather, Louis, and this might be a little bit of a longer thing here. First and foremost, I love my grandfather. I got to spend a lot of time with him, which is probably a good and a bad thing. I love my grandfather though, and he had a really rough life when he was growing up. he he worked in a paper factory, doing whatever he could do. They moved around a lot and had a little bit of a rougher time financially in life. But my grandfather had a really bad childhood. Was abused a lot, and unfortunately continued that cycle on when I was a kid. So I that's partly some of the reason why I had a partial bad childhood was because of that. I for a long time hated my grandfather for those things. But the more I got to think about it, and I was a certified counselor in the military, so I got a little bit of education on that, and I had to deal with things. And the more I got to thinking about it, and while I don't condone my grandfather's actions, I feel bad for him at the same time because I know that that life was what he lived as well. So, and again, I don't excuse him for that, but I feel bad for him at the same time. And I do love my grandfather. I have cherished memories of playing croquet out in the backyard, or just he took me fishing a couple times in a pond across from where they lived, and he was always down for playing dominoes or cards or board games or whatnot. He passed away when I was 13, I think, and he really liked snacks. So he was the cookie guy, and he always had some kind of candy or something like that laying around that he would eat. So I remember when we had his viewing at the funeral, I snuck a packet of circus peanuts in there for him because that was one of his favorite snacks. So another thing that my grandpa did for me, with some of the stuff that he had did on the bad side, was he gave me a lot of knowledge, which was unfortunate at the time, but later on in life it helped me help a lot of people. So I would have never been able to help those people had I not been in that situation myself. Um, I think it made me super overprotective of my kids, which was good in a way because I wanted to make sure that they didn't have anything like that happen to them. But bad in a way because maybe I was a little too overprotective, and there were some things in their childhood that maybe they missed out on because of it. I mean, I wouldn't let them ride their bike around the block without me. So when they wanted to ride around the block, I'd jump on. I had a bike, and I'd jump on my bike and go with them. I had a fenced-in yard. I would joke with them all the time that the fenced-in yard was to keep them in and not keep people out, but it was really to make sure that people were safe. But yeah, I don't wanna break off into my daughters at this point just yet, because this episode really is about my grandparents, and so that you can get an understanding of my roots, maybe a little bit of my childhood, and see what's going on. My my dad's dad, his side of the family came from New York, and I have a lot of history in my family on that side, and I know more history on that side because it was a little bit more documented. I know a little bit about my grandma's side, but not a whole lot. Most of the people in my grandma Wilda's side of the family were police officers. There's a lot of police officers in my grandma's side. And my dad's side, his dad came from New York. They lived in the Learn family. Actually, my dad's family, their last name was Lerner, but when they moved to America in mid 1600s, they changed their name, and drop the ER. And I am from the John Learn line. Uh, his father's name was Casper Learn, or Lerner. And the Learn family owned one of the first taverns. I think it was the first tavern in American United States. At that time, it wasn't United States yet, but it was called the Learn Tavern. And there's a lot of history there. The tavern ultimately was burned down, and one of the reasons why it was burned down was because my family had, and this is stories that haven't passed down. My family had, part of having a tavern is you have places for people to stay, rooms to rent, and you also have a bar and a restaurant and all that good stuff. And they had refused service to a colonel that was there. It's part of Sullivan's March. So they refused service to a colonel, and he was super mad about it. And he hired Native Americans to burn the tavern down, and also go to the family farm where all the family lived, and round up basically my entire family, burn the farm down, and kill my family. My family line survived by one 12-year-old kid who got away. The last three people alive were this kid, his father, and his grandfather. His grandfather tried to draw the Native Americans away from the cart as they were leaving. I think he knew that he probably wasn't going to make it, but he was hoping that his son and his grandson would. And he ended up getting killed, and the Native Americans were still hot on the track of the cart that they were trying to get away in. So the young boy and his father overturned the cart, trying to get away too fast. And then as the dad ran out to try to buy his son some time, his son actually got away. And this all happened in Pennsylvania, which there's still a lot of Learns in Pennsylvania. So if you're one of the Learns from Pennsylvania and you're listening, if I do put this out, which I think at this point I probably will, because my better half is Miranda is she said I should probably put this out. Maybe it'll help somebody. So, but if you're in Pennsylvania and your last name is Learn, you're probably from one of the other lines. And hello. But anyways, so that young boy at 12 moved to New York because he didn't have anything left. His entire family was genocided, and the farm was burnt down. The family business was burnt down. And he moved to New York and started again, and that's where my family line comes from. So very sombering. I know my family was genocided by Native Americans. I don't fault them. I do fault the colonel. I don't fault the Native Americans. But I also don't believe that they deserve any reparations, because everything that they're getting reparations for, they did to my family. So maybe unpopular view, but yeah, that's where I stand out. Now, we did do a lot of bad things to Native Americans as well, but two wrongs don't make a right? So with that said, I want to thank everybody for listening, and hopefully this episode got you a little insight more of my family, got you a little bit insight more of my grandparents and my roots of where I come from and how I feel and how I think on things. And yeah, again, I loved all four of my grandparents. I have good memories mostly, and some bad memories. But again, I don't fault my bad memories. But anyways, that's it. Thank you. The next episode is going to be about my parents. So please stay tuned, and we'll get through that. Thank you.